Welcome to the Wellness Founders Podcast, where we explore the business of wellness and the people creating the future of well-being. Today, my guest, Marc Förster Algás, the dream of Catalonia, the founder of Karisma. And Karisma is a curated community of growth-minded seven-figure entrepreneurs and up. And also, more recently, the creator of the official Wellness Rave of Barcelona, which is really what interests me about getting Marc on here. And the Wellness Rave is a morning party, electronic music, wellness, workshops, ice baths, vendors. And one thing I really appreciate about Marc as well is that he's got a YouTube channel and he documents this kind of raw journey of building these communities. So both in the entrepreneurial space, in the wellness space, which I imagine there's quite a bit of crossover, at least in your community there in Barcelona. And we met, if my memory serves me correctly, in Croatia a few years ago at a retreat. I don't know if we met at Nomad Base or we met after that. I think it was after that.
I just saw you.
Do you remember that?
I saw you during the conference, and someone was like, "Wow, this guy Jordan, he's an absolute beast." And I was like, "Wow, this guy is amazing." And then we finally actually got to meet during the retreat, and this person was completely right. I mean, from the very beginning, you've always been someone that I've deeply admired, someone who is so, giving, yet so resourceful. It feels like you're always a few steps ahead with all the new tendencies. So structured. I am so jealous of your Asana, which is now gone on to ClickUp, I think.
ClickUp, yeah.
But I really admire you as a human and founder, really.
I appreciate it, man. And likewise, the admiration is mutual. And I see a lot of things in you as far as the resiliency, the resourcefulness, and just seeing kind of how you went through your own learning process when we first met. It was so cool to see like where you've gotten now, because I remember at the time you were kind of just starting to build Karisma. You were like working on a co-living project. You were busting down some walls and like showing yourself like knocking off like drywall and like painting and doing all this stuff, which is, I think, is one of the beautiful things about documenting that kind of thing on YouTube. And then you've kind of seemingly done this transition. So I know you pulled off the co-living part to be more focused. Tell me about that transition from, you going from this Karisma community that's got all these different moving parts. It's co-living, it's a founder community, it's these pop-up events, it's all this different stuff. Wellness Rave, which couple days ago from this recording, you had 800 people for your second Wellness Rave. Like, tell me about that journey of like how you decided what to focus on, because I think that's one of the hardest things for people with multiple projects like this.
100%. And honestly, this has been one of my biggest lessons over the last year. I started Karisma actually 5 years ago, and the idea at the time was to open up a surf house made out of shipping containers in Portugal. I had no idea where this was going to take me, but I was just committed to explore and see, what would actually happen. And so through the exploration process, I came across the concept of co-living, right at the time when remote work was kind of like starting to really pop off. And so, during these 5 years, I feel like I've been doing a master's degree in community building, which is this very new concept in a way, right? I remember like only 2 to 3 years ago, I was thinking, okay, should I actually talk about this on LinkedIn? Is this potentially too niche? And now it feels like everybody's really talking about this. So basically, I did my first launch with retreats. Then I opened up a first physical co-living space here in Barcelona in 2022. And I kind of started building community on the side really for my own, selfish interest. I had been traveling the world for 7 years. I came back to start my business here in Barcelona, and I kind of felt like I had changed, and that many of the people I was meeting, I wasn't maybe resonating so much, or I had to like leave a certain side of myself. So I kind of started like hosting events just completely for free until I started merging it with the co-living. And then at some point, I realized that I cared more about this private WhatsApp group chat than my actual co-living business. And I decided to make a very impulsive decision, an intuitive one in 2023, to open up a new line of business, which was more of this social club approach. Instead of having a physical space, it was more focused around experiences. And so since then, it has taken many different shapes and sizes. I've hosted over 300 events. I've hosted trips, retreats, everything in between. And even though maybe from the outside it could have seemed like, okay, this guy is completely lost, which maybe there's a degree of truth to it, during this whole time there was always kind of like something that never changed, and that was community. Right? All along, it was always about bringing people together, no matter if it was during a retreat, the co-living, the social club, the experiences, the wellness rave, right? And once you bring these people together, helping them grow in life and in business, right? So fast forward to this year, in April, I had kind of like an emotional breakdown. I just had way too many balls in the air. I had more things than I could actually handle. And so I took a step back and I was like, okay, what is the one thing from everything that I'm doing that is actually working? And it was this newly launched membership within the general community for more high-level founders, which we launched purely out of feedback from our own members. And so basically deciding to focus on one thing, selling the co-living, getting rid of the general community, saying no to the Montenegro project, which was too good to be true, has been one of the best decisions of my life, in terms of my mental headspace, in terms of, showing our team where to really go and making it all from the operational point of view and from the communication point of view much easier. And so the only thing that we kind of still kept from the good old days was this wellness rave, which was honestly just this experiment. We just wanted to, hop on this trend. And it was also something that we were very much aligned on. Right? Because at the end of the day, we are a founders community, but we're not just trying to help people scale their companies, but also the founders behind them, right? And I think that the wellness component is a fundamental piece of that. And so, yeah, honestly, it's gotten completely out of control. We have just hosted our second one. It was 800 people who attended.
That's wild. It's so wild to do 800 on your second one.
Insane.
Even 400 on your first one. That was... because I watched the videos and been following along, and hats off to you, man, for taking on such a big thing the first couple events, because it's very rare that someone's able to pull that off.
And it's 100% the team behind it. I mean, really, without the team, this all would have not been possible, and especially a lot of collaborations with a lot of other brands, facilitators. This was a huge team effort. I'm here kind of the face of it, getting all the credits, but I could mention dozens of people who have really made sure that this was a huge success.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I have a similar resonating feeling of like team being so important in these kind of things, because at the scale that you're doing it, and even at the scale that we do it, which our biggest one was 300, maybe 330, something like that. And even the scale of that, it's like there's so many moving parts, there's so many people involved, and you just have to be able to trust that people are going to get things done. And it's tough. There's a lot of directions I can go here, and I wrote down some notes. I think one of the main questions that came out first was the through line of your career has been community building and has been, bringing people together. And I'm just curious, what do you think makes you different? What do you think it makes you capable? Because a lot of people try to build community and fail miserably and burn out, and they realize it's not for them. So where is this intersection of like this being your personality traits? Where is it like you practicing the skills? And what do you think, what does it come down to? Like, why do you think you've been successful in community building the way that you have?
I mean, it's been a crazy journey with a lot of ups and downs. I think every time there was a big down, failure or stopping was not ever something we considered. It was never even an option. Right? And I consider myself super lucky because I truly have found my ikigai. And I think I was only able to find it through trial and error, right? That whole period where I was launching the co-living brand while still hosting all of these kind of free experiences at the very beginning were kind of a little bit of the first foot in the door. And I think many people, they look at a community and then they see the final results, right? And it's like, okay, how the hell am I now going to build a community with, whether it is tens or hundreds or thousands of people, right? It's this big chicken and egg problem, right? That we community builders face. But I think it just needs to be something that's truly genuine. I think community is not this business opportunity or this trend that you just jump onto. That you're like, okay, now we're going to do this. We're going to create some sort of pitch deck and now let's build this community. I think it really needs to be something that you truly care about. And I think one of the things that I have been very consistent on from the very, very beginning has been the values of the community. My father, he's been a businessman for the majority of his life. And when I started the whole concept, I remember I would maybe look for his approval and be like, hey, look what I'm building, this and that. And he was just kind of like, Marc, this is not a real business. Because for me, the first at least 6 months, all I was thinking about was the philosophy, what really brings all of these different people together, right? And he was like, Marc, show me the numbers. And I think that especially in community, and even more so when you build an international community or even an online one, you need to really think about what unites all of these different people so that the moment they step into the room, or even if it's a course or an online call, they're immediately going to have that psychological safety. They're going to be able to put their guard down and really feel like, okay, these are my people. And so, for example, in our case, we always say we are a community of high-level, growth-minded founders. You can have a 10 million business, but if you don't fit in the values, it does not matter. You're out completely. And so I think having this proper curation from the start is fundamental. But again, going back to the chicken and egg problem, what do you do? Right? And I think there's a few ways to actually do this. I think one of the first ones is to potentially start building an audience, right? Or doing some sort of experiences. For example, what we see a lot of influencers doing nowadays, or even creators, is that they build the audience first, right? They build the distribution, and some use it to build products and services. Others actually care about then bringing these people together, which is a lot easier when you've already nurtured these people and established that trust. Another great example for me is Show Up. It's a conscious global community, and they do every single Wednesday sunrise meditation at the beach. It's completely free, and it's just like this one thing that is super aligned with their ideal customer persona or community member, and it just like attracted like hundreds and hundreds of people every single week. And then at some point they had this big community, and we're like, okay, well, what do we do with this? Right? So then they started hosting retreats, and honestly, the sky's the limit when it comes to that. The other alternative there is just, hey, maybe you have a business, maybe money is maybe not the biggest priority at the moment. So you really kind of do it, as something that you're genuinely passionate about. And when it comes to that, you are someone that actually comes to mind, right? You have your own business, right? You're not doing community because, you need to pay the rent. You do it because you love it, because you're truly aligned with that. And I think in general, there's so many communities popping up. If you're concerned about, okay, I'm so but there's already something of this, something of that. I think the key here is to be as authentic as possible, to be 100% yourself. Compared to other high-level entrepreneur communities here in Barcelona, we're the only ones who actually care about also scaling the founder, not just the business. And we put a huge focus on deep connections, right? Trying to break kind of the superficial, dry and boring networking that many other communities kind of provide and focus on.
Yeah, man, I love that. And I want to go back to a few things you've said. One was this, if you look from the outside, you might see someone who's early stage in that community building, that's doing all these things, that's offering the free events here, and then has this community and is doing this co-living. And just like you said, I think the quote that really resonates with me is keep wandering, you're not lost. Like
100%.
Like there is a feeling of being lost in the sense that none of us really know what we're doing. And for me, it's been very much a process of trial and error to see what resonates. But if I'm doing it in a way where I'm actually showing up as my true self, I'm offering a ton of value. And I think one through line of all the interviews that I've had with community builders thus far and people that I see that are really doing it well, every single one of them started off doing something where it was from the heart and it was a community they wanted to, and they offered it for free. And they got people engaged in a way where there was so much value in the free events that they could start finding ways to triage to paid events and paid experiences and things like that, because the community was asking for it. The community was like, there was so much trust built already. I'm really impressed by that, by how you've done that, and you have to be able to stick it through. And I think it is a huge advantage if you don't need the money from it, right? It's similar to what you said. It's like when we were building these things here in Medellin, like none of the partners need this to be their full-time thing. Us need it to be the income source for our survival. And I think that comes through in how you end up creating the community, even subconsciously. Because if you're needing the money from it, the way that you interact with your community is much different, and it becomes much more about pitching. It becomes much more about extracting resources from them rather than being focused on the connection.
Value, 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 value. And I 100% agree with you that, you just got to kind of fail forward. You just got to fail as many times as you possibly can and just experiment. Maybe
Yeah.
you start hosting events, and then you realize this is not what I was really thinking about. And honestly, I've come to stop telling people how they need to do their things because I think people just need to go on their own journey. And I think one of the beautiful things about community building is that there's just so many different models that you can apply, right? There's no one size fits all. And I think it's up to everyone to kind of define what it is, what they, what aligns most with themselves.
And one of the things for you when you were determining that model and you were figuring out where you wanted to go with all this, you mentioned you had this mental breakdown, this mental lapse back in April, and it was like, I've got too many balls in the air. I need to figure out how to say no to more things. I need to drop some things. This thing's too good to be true. I think this is an issue a lot of people have in the current day because there's so many, and I'll speak for myself, I have this issue where there's so many amazing things I could be part of, and there's so many opportunities coming to me at this stage that I do need to say no to a lot of things, but I find that because there's so many good things to do, I'm still trying to do all of them. What went into the decision criteria? What went into, I know there's an intuitive piece, but how did you break this down of like, okay, I need to really survey what it is I'm doing and what's the most high leverage thing to do? Like, how did you come to that decision?
I think at the time I was reading Essentialism, and there's this
Yeah.
really good graph that the author shows in the book. It's kind of yourself in the center, right? And then there's arrows coming out of it, each of them symbolizing kind of amount of effort you're putting in, right? And so when you are doing many things, it may feel like you are very busy, and from the outside it looks like, wow, you're doing this Montenegro project, you're doing this person is super successful, right? But in reality is you're only having these very small arrows coming out of yourself, right? Because you're distributing all of that effort and energy. Whereas if you focus on one thing, that arrow is going to be just one, and it's going to be super long because all of your energy is going towards one thing. And then there's also this other quote I got from Alex Ramosi, I think it was, which is only start filling up the next glass once the first one starts overspilling, right? And I think one of the things I've realized from all of this is that I was never able to fully step out of the business, right, from all the operations, because it was just impossible to fully delegate. It was impossible to build systems because there was just way too many things. And so at the end of the day, one of the things I've also been doing, so after seeing all of this, it was clear that I had to get rid of things 100%. Obviously, I looked at the financials, but another guiding factor in all of my decision making over the last couple of years has also been my intuition, right? At some point, for me, the co-living felt like hell, because I cared about community, but everything I was worried about was just, maintenance issues. Then the whole Montenegro thing was incredible, but there was not alignment with the team. And so I
And
think,
go into that for a moment because that looked like something that, and you invited me to that, and I was like, oh man, I would love to be there. I was like in my mind, I'm like, this would be great. I might want to make a trip there. How did you determine that the alignment wasn't there?
I think what really helped me understand, I think your body just speaks to you many times, and often we've been taught to be just very rational and to prioritize rational decisions. But from the very beginning, it was just always like, this is just too good to be true. This is just like this thing that feels like it's going to be incredible. And it's this final opportunity to build the biggest nomad hotel in the whole world. But at the end of the day, you also need to be fully aware of how much effort, how much energy can you really be able to put in. Sometimes obviously you just got to choose. There's always trade-offs at the end of the day, right? And so I think another big thing that maybe I didn't consider for many years was really the financials and the business model side. I think a lot of us community builders, starting with myself, we start with impact. We really care about, building something that's gonna transform a lot of lives, right? Really make a positive impact. But the reality is that at the end of the day, for you to be able to make impact long-term into the future, you need to have a business that generates sales and generates profits from the beginning, because that's the thing that's actually going to allow you to do this long-term. So we had, compared to, on the site, also this other community which had 250, almost 300 members. But the reason I dropped that was because I knew that at some point growth would stagnate. And what I mean is that we knew that churn was around 10%, right? So if we had 100 members, 10 people would actually leave. If we had 1,000, 100 would actually go. And so it just became this thing where we were just putting more and more and more effort to try to get more sales and to get people to stay. But then the summers would come, the Christmas would come, people would churn. And it just became this thing that we were not able to actually grow. And so at the end of the day, one of the things that made it super clear is that in order for this to be something that would actually allow me to invest more into the relationships, pay my team what they deserve to be paid, we had to put so much effort for very, very little upside, right? And so you also want to look for kind of high leverage opportunities in general. That's why a lot of people are building online communities, because you build it once and you can have hundreds and thousands of members around the world who are just logging into your community online. Whereas when we're talking about events potentially, every single one of these events requires staff to be there. It requires promotion. And also one of the big things I realized there is that more isn't necessarily better. In fact, more can be counterproductive, because you are diluting the quality, you're diluting your time, making it harder to actually provide more value consistently. And so for us, Karisma Select, which was the premium membership, was kind of this thing that was just kind of, it was just so obvious. People in this community, especially more established founders, they wanted less but better, right? And so it was the one thing that was actually working, that had proper leverage, and that we really felt that we could actually replicate long term.
One thing that I think is interesting is you went into this Karisma business and you obviously niche down into 7+ figure entrepreneurs. I'm curious for anybody there's probably a lot of people out there who would see that and be like, well, I can't create a community with members that are 7+ figures, 8 figures, 9 figures. I don't have that. And I imagine when you started, that wasn't where you were at. I don't know where you're at now, but how do you go about from a mindset perspective of like, I'm going to create a membership for these 7-figure entrepreneurs, but I may not be on that level. And so where is it that I'm bringing the value, or was there a mindset shift that you had to make to be in those rooms?
So you kind of cut off a little bit, but I'm assuming that your question was what had to happen for us to be able to, start creating a community of such established founders here in Barcelona, right?
Well, when you personally are maybe not a 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneur, but the intention that you have is to create a community for them. Like, is there a mindset that you had to adopt at that time when you were first jumping into Karisma Select and you're like, I'm going to do this, and I know that these people in the room are maybe well further ahead than I am?
So when we started at the very beginning with Karisma Select, it was more of a community for 6 and 7+. Didn't want to put a silly on it, but it was mainly 6 and 7. So we definitely ourselves, also fit into that category. And so the crazy thing was that Select was at the beginning kind of this side project, right? We were maybe putting in 20% of our energy into it. So also when we did that change, we kind of thought, okay, what if we put 100% of this energy into Karisma Select? And so through, just pure coincidence, one of the members of Select ended up becoming, only a few months ago, our co-founder. He is someone who's built a unicorn company. He's had other 4 very successful companies. He himself is an investor in real estate and startups. So, he catapulted us, in record time to a whole nother level. And in fact, we still have a lot of 6-figure founders within the community, but those people are people that, either where they're at the very beginning or right now really have a lot to share, a lot to give, or it's people that have a lot of potential, right? So, one of the funny things we started doing and experimenting was, we started saying 7+, which attracted in return more 7 and 8 figure founders and also more 6-figure founders. Because the more established the founder, the more they want to be with other people who can actually fully understand them, where they can get challenged or even inspired as well. And so one of the biggest lessons I had was that when Dory joined, we were charging like 3,000 euros per year. And the moment he joined, he was like, guys, we gotta bump up this price. I was like, bro, like this is already so much more, we just upped the price. And he said, no, we gotta get to 6K now. And I was like, okay, let's first improve the experience. Let's do all of these different things and then we can do it. It's like, no, we're gonna do this from the get-go. And the surprising thing is that, first of all, it attracted more high-level founders, first of all. It also pushed us to really accelerate much more the improvement of the experience, but it was also much easier because we actually had the resources to invest into world-class facilitators, into better venues, into having the best catering at every single one of the events. And so that in turn also made the product even better. And for me, this has been kind of from the mindset perspective, right? Like a huge transformation. And I would encourage anyone to, obviously easier said than done, to not be afraid to test with pricing and stuff like that. Because if you really want to provide an A-class experience, you need to charge it. That's as easy as that. If you are going to charge little, if you're not aware of your own worth, first of all, people are going to feel it. And then the people you're also going to attract are people that are going to try to, argue about every single dollar. Whereas the people that actually invest and have the money to do these things, these are people that, are not going to be going after you kind of like, can I get a discount here? Can I get this or that? And so it's been a huge, it's been a huge upgrade. Everybody in the community is kind of feeling it. The facilitators we have, the speakers we're attracting, it's just this snowball effect, right? Where charging higher provides a better experience, which attracts better people, which in turn attracts more people. It's just this beautiful experiment that we've been running over the last few months, and it's really been paying off tremendously.
And so you make these shifts in Karisma and Karisma Select, start charging more. And when was the point that you're like, okay, let's add this wellness component to what we're doing? And maybe it's not directly from Karisma, but it's kind of like, from what I know, from what I see online, it's you're partnering with another event company or another production company that helps you put this on. But tell me about that like first idea of, okay, let's throw a wellness rave. Like where did that come from? And you're like, 400 people, let's go find the venue, let's find the sponsors, let's do all this. How did that come about?
So one of our revenue streams we had was always, events. And so we were the creators of Connecting Groove, one of the most iconic afterwork concepts for entrepreneurs and creatives here.
Which I went to one of those. Did I go to the first one or was it the second one?
I think it was one of the very first ones.
I think it might have been this. It might have been the second one.
Yeah, it was even called Networking Groove at the beginning. Terrible name.
Yeah, Zapateo Suave. The
yeah, exactly. You know it, baby.
It was, I remember all this, but I was like, I was so curious to see how it was going to go because I saw you in the process of like, hey, we're going to do this, and kind of like frantic, right, about making it work. And I was like, I have no idea what to expect. I feel like I might go up here and there's like 5 people. And I went up there, and it was like hundreds of people. I was like, dude, this guy's a stud. Like he's gonna pull stuff off, and that's part of when I knew. I was like, whatever Marc does, it's gonna be successful.
Thank you, man.
And then it truly, like, I saw you in a different light just from going to that event because I had a lot of confidence in you, and we'd met and we'd talked and we'd had time together, but I hadn't been to one of your events. So I think once you go to someone's event, you get to see how they actually interact with people, how they bring things together. It's just a different, like, oh, okay, I get it. So
100%.
that was a moment for me. I was like, this is cool.
Thank you, man. Yeah, and I think, in a way, we've always been thinking of events to really bring everyone together, our members, and also sometimes we were using also events as kind of top of funnel, right? This first entry point into our wider ecosystem. But all of these events that actually brought a lot of people together, right? Which allowed us to create this public experience for everyone outside of the community as well. We're always just kind of afterworks, which involved also drinks, music. And at the end of the day, there's only so many things that you can do, right? And at the end of the day, one of the people in my team always says, we're not an NGO, right? We also need to make money from this to be able to sustain the team, to be able to invest into better experiences. So it always kind of felt like most of the events we were doing, right, had some component also with, party and also a little bit of, drinks, because that also brought in some money at the end of the day, right? And so when we saw this new wellness trend with soft clubbing or coffee parties and stuff like that, it was kind of like, oh my God, this is exactly what we need. And at the very beginning, the idea was just to do this coffee shop party. We were looking for different venues, and then we found one that was actually quite big. And we thought, okay, maybe we can bring 200 people here or something like that. Let's see what happens. It honestly happened in 6 weeks. From the moment we found the venue until we actually did it, it was 6 weeks. And most of the time, we always take like 4 weeks to kind of fill up an event, 3 weeks or something like that. So we thought, okay, we can do it. We've already done events with 100 to 200 people. And then suddenly this event just got completely out of control. And we sold like 450 tickets. I was already happy with selling 200. And then we knew, okay, this is something that we need to really pursue. This is something, there's something here, and there's a very clear trend that we need to hop on. And so from that moment on, this was pretty much the only event we have still carried on from the beginnings. Because in this moment of, getting rid of all the things that we were doing, we also got rid of different event concepts. Because at the end of the day, we were just hosting too many events, right? And so we thought, okay, how can we do, instead of just 10 a month, how can we do like one that makes as much as all the other ones, right? And the funny thing is that this event alone was more than the entire previous membership combined, with over 200 members, which included 10 free events per month, right? So this is me going back to the point of leverage and ROI. Here we're talking about doing one big event, maybe every 2 months or something like that, that brings in much more, and that can actually be, outsourced to some extent, because you can create all these playbooks for, okay, this is how we're going to do it with all the brands, this is how we're going to do it with all the facilitators, this is how we need to set up the venue. It's something that you can easily replicate. But before, we had over 200 members, and every week we were kind of thinking of new experiences, starting from scratch and everything else. And I always loved it, but slowly, because I was doing so many and the return was so little, at some point I was kind of burning out, and it was just kind of like, I cannot even travel. I have to be here all the time. I cannot replicate this because it's always something new. And when you're also charging this membership every single month, people have expectations. Right? The membership sounds like something very exciting. People are paying you something every single month, right? But at the end of the day, there's also these expectations that you need to fulfill. And sometimes maybe just one very big event can be way less work, but much more return at the end of the day. And so honestly, right now, we have just hosted the second one. And our plan for this is to find a partner who is very experienced in events production, ideally internationally, that can really help us take this global, especially, take on really the logistical side of the experience, while we take on the whole, marketing and partnerships aspect of it. And for us, one of the biggest mottos from this week is ABC, always be collaborating. If you want to host the best experiences, don't try to do everything by yourself. Focus on what are the things that you know how to do best, and try to find the partners or, the brands that can really complement you and help you with everything else that you may not be the best at. So for example, I could go to someone like you, Jordan, and be like, yo, let's bring this to Medellin. You may have all the experience, you know how to do this, how, all the local partners. So yeah, it's been a crazy experience. And I think this is, again, another example of just try and fail and see where it goes. We've hosted so many other event concepts. Some of them we just hosted once. We immediately saw that, okay, this is not it. But sometimes you just, hit it on the notes or the nail or whatever you call it. And yeah, this was definitely it. One of them.
Nice, man. So you've done 2 so far. I imagine there's going to be a third. Like, you're continuing this.
We have to.
Okay.
I mean, like,
So
the idea was just to do one and do it as good as possible and then see.
yeah.
But after the success, we just have to. We have
Yeah.
to.
So tell me about within these first 2, when you reflect on the lessons and you reflect on the things that happened, the challenges, the issues. We've got a little preview into like, okay, collaborate with people, find a production company, but go into like as specific as you can, like what happened the first 2 that really open your eyes to the challenges of this scale, the challenges of this type of event. You're obviously entering the wellness space where you're communicating with a lot of brands, a lot of different people, you're setting up the venue. Where did you find the biggest issues to start?
Well, there was honestly so many mistakes in the first and then the second one, so many. And I think part of that is just going into it knowing that is actually going to happen. You are going to make mistakes, and that's the whole point.
It's a feature, not a bug.
It's the whole point. It's the only way you're actually going to get better at it. And so I think, one of the big, for example, I wouldn't say it's a big mistake, right? But one of the big things that we could have done better in the first experience, right, was kind of planning the start of the experience. Often you think, okay, we're going to have DJs, we're going to have this, we're going to have that. But you really want to also design kind of the user experience. How are they feeling at the very beginning? How do you have this crescendo, How do you build it up? And where do you want to take people to, right? And so especially most of the time, and this you can do with small scale events, larger scale events, you don't want them to arrive at the space and just be completely scattered and just kind of lost of like, okay, what is actually happening here? But maybe start with a smaller space and only opening up the next spaces afterwards as more people start arriving, so they really have some sort of mingling zone at the very beginning, right? So kind of set the intentions from the start. This is something we've always been doing at every single one of our experiences. We always do some sort of small onboarding, or we have some sort of dynamics ready from the start to make sure that people, have this permission to just be themselves, to walk up to other people and stuff like that. And so one of the things that was kind of lacking in the last one is that we just kind of let everyone in, right? And then people were just kind of scattered, a little bit lost of, okay, what is actually happening here? And it would have been much better just to congregate them perhaps in one sort of welcome area at the beginning, start maybe with some collective, I don't know, in this case, maybe some sort of movement exercises, maybe some sort of ecstatic dance, something that just gets people really removing all the, the masks, the tensions, right, to really arrive at the space. And we actually saw that happening a few hours later after the activities started happening, stuff like that. People just fully relaxed into that. And so, on top of it, I think with logistics, one of the things I definitely recommend is document everything as you are doing it. Especially if this is something that you're going to be replicating, you want to make sure that this is something that you don't have to consistently start from scratch every single time. And this is, probably something that you probably master. You're like the SOP king here, right? But, I feel like there was so many things that we were trying to still figure out from the very, very beginning. And so, even when the event was just about to start, it was kind of like, okay, what are we going to do here? And it was kind of similar to the first time and stuff like that. One of the crazy things that we got this one as well was we got 20 volunteers or 25 volunteers. And it was crazy to see how many people actually really want to help and contribute. All we did was just post a story on Instagram, and a bunch of people were just so ready to support. And then I think one of the biggest keys also to this last experience was sponsors. Sponsors are so important. Some of them may give you money, but many of them are just gonna, give you things that are gonna make the overall experience better in general, right? So we had, for example, Avanto Wellness Social Club. They facilitated, these very Finnish guys facilitating these incredible ice baths. Then we had Lululemon facilitating all of the yoga sessions. We had this guy who flew out from Japan to do this very original matcha there right on the spot. And it was a lot of these things that we just didn't have to worry about at the same time. And one of the big lessons I've also gotten is don't just think about how, but who, right? Especially the bigger the experience becomes. Don't think about, okay, how can we actually get all this matcha salt and stuff like that? Think about who could actually do this and how can you truly find a win-win in this relationship. And, there's always, even beyond the financial part, there's always ways to really make this a real win-win. And I think without the sponsors and the partners, this experience, wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. We've got a volunteer team of about 15 to 18 for every event that we do on the Sweat and Chill side. And it's been game changing to have people that are just there to like really support and be part of the experience and take responsibility for the experience of the guests. I'm more curious about the sponsor side and how you engage with the sponsors, how much of that was inbound, how much of that was outbound, and yeah, like what's the value proposition there. And I'll footnote it to say that it's been tough for us because I think the culture here in Colombia is a little bit different. A lot of these local brands, at least, they haven't had a ton of experience with event activations and sponsoring things. And so it's really on us to be excellent at articulating the value of being at our events. And sometimes that can be tough just culturally. There's kind of different thoughts around things that it's more transactional or like what are we going to get from it? Looking at like the pure, I go to this event, I get what? And for us, there's been kind of a change in mindset that we actually need to be a content company and not a community. And so everything revolves around the content, and that becomes the value for the guests being in the content because the value of the sponsors giving, offering content packages, things like that. So I'm just curious how you've gone about that in the first two and gotten, sponsors there.
So the first one, we had one big sponsor. And then there was like 3 little tables with some people showcasing their products and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That was it. But the interesting thing is that we went for, first of all, a partner that was as aligned as possible, right? Like what sort of, like really try to reverse engineer it. Think about what brands has exactly the same audience that we are trying to go after in this sort of experience. And so for us, in the first one, we tried to get the biggest sponsor possible, which was Honest Screens. It was a big shot. And we actually didn't get any money from them. In fact, we had to help them cover the costs, right? But it kind of got the ball rolling. The other sponsors that came later, they had no idea of the actual relationship we had with Honest Screens, which I'm not sure you guys know it in Medellin, but it's a huge brand.
I know Honest
here in south of Europe. And so what we did was, look, we're going to give you a whole stand where you're going to be able to sell all of your products to all of these people. And so the money machine was connected to the actual venue, so they were getting actually the money. This was also part of the deal and stuff like that, which made it that we didn't have to pay for the venue, and we just had to cover the expenses. So we actually made a loss having this first sponsor, but it made it so much easier to get your foot in the door with all of the next sponsors afterwards, right? And so I think this also applies to, I recommend this to potentially a lot of freelancers, agency owners who want to land these amazing clients. I'm always like, offer your service for free. But then when you reach out to new potential customers, say that you work with this brand and the other brand and this one. And this gives you all this credibility. Of course, you need a lot of time as well. So we already, with 2 months ahead of time, we built this amazing sponsor deck, which showcase as many numbers as possible. Who is within the audience? What is the age range? How many people are coming? Really make it as visual as possible for them to understand who is going to be attending this experience. And so we actually also started from the start with a few kind of top-notch brands like Lululemon. And all we did was, look, we're going to give you this whole stage. All you got to do is just do the yoga at this experience, bring all the yoga mats, bring the facilitators and stuff like that. Why the hell would they say no? And obviously, to get the foot in the door, the key was finding someone within the organization that we knew. So we also leveraged our own community to try to get the contacts in there, because it's much easier to come through an actual referral, right, than just through some sort of outbound message. And once we had that, we used this AI sales agent that automates the LinkedIn outbound process. And then we were like, okay, we're working with Lululemon, with Honest Greens, with this, and that. And then at some point, it was just like easy peasy, basically. Some of them, we got money from. Other ones, we just kind of, did some sort of exchange where, hey, look, you're going to be offering this experience. You're going to be offering these products. So yeah, you just got to start small and invest sometimes into the long term as well.
Awesome, man. We got a couple more minutes left, so I wanted to leave with one last question that I think is one of the more fun ones. And it's like, what's Marc's legacy in the wellness industry? What's the movement that you want to be known for creating?
I consider myself a community entrepreneur. Everything I will do long into the future will be connected to community building. I deeply care about making an impact and making a difference in people's lives. And I have found that my way of actually making that happen is by fostering real authentic connections between people. I really believe that the people you surround yourself with is who you become, right? So kind of for me, bringing people together is this secret recipe to helping people grow, whether it's with their businesses, with themselves and stuff like that. And so I really believe that the way we live is shifting. Even just the whole idea of communities a few years ago was something nobody was even talking about. And I think we're going to see a bigger, I think this trend is only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and going to change how we live fundamentally. What I mean is, why do we have to live inside of shoeboxes? Even if it's a very fancy shoebox in a really nice neighborhood, I want to touch some fucking grass. I want to know my neighbors, And I think that we saw the rise of co-living, right? Which is kind of how I got introduced into the whole world of communities. I think we're going to see a big movement into the world of co-housing. And that's something that kind of I have my eye on for the future. With co-housing, what I mean is that instead of, sharing an apartment or house with other people, I think we're going to start living, in sort of communities, going back to the tribal days, but instead of kind of more like tribal, or hippie communes, I think everyone is going to have their own kind of, spaces, their own homes with shared facilities, maybe 30, 60 minutes away from the big cities, right? And having a lot of shared spaces where people can really have lots of serendipitous moments to connect with each other, to be more connected to nature, and where also the people living there are truly going to be like-minded. It can be, communities for wellness first people, for founders, for creatives, maybe for people just who have families, right? So I think that for me, where I see myself going is just kind of doubling down every single year into this whole community space, which I think is only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. In fact, I think that communities are going to become, an actual luxury, right? Not just this thing that we already have, right? But this thing that we're going to crave more and more as, AI and things like that are going to become more and more prominent in our lives. And I think we're already seeing kind of glimpse of that future in places maybe like Japan, where people cannot even, get a partner or go on a date, or it's kind of crazy. And even like anxiety levels, depression levels are just going through the roof. I think that these communities can bring a lot of purpose, a lot of meaning, a lot of overall well-being to people. And especially when you bring these people together around activities that actually make you better as a person from a health point of view in your business, whatever that may be. So yeah, for me, Karisma is this, I think, going to become this umbrella company out of which a lot of things are going to come out of. And I think that's the exciting thing about building a community or building an audience, whether it's also through content, right? You are building the distribution, you are owning it. And then if you ask this audience, this community, what they really want, that's gold, because they're going to tell you what they need, the value they are looking for, and you're going to be able to give it to them. And so, yeah, really excited to be in the space. Somehow ended up in this crazy, I don't know if it's a tsunami, whatever that may be, but super grateful.
Awesome, brother. Well, I couldn't agree more with a lot of those sentiments, and also just again so appreciative of you and admire you and what you're building. Hope to make it to a wellness rave at some point. Hopefully you can make it here for a sweat and chill at some point.
Honestly, I really want to go to Medellin, whether it is with the wellness rave or with Karisma. It's up there in the list.
Awesome, brother. Well, great to chat with you. Appreciate all the insights, having you on here, and looking forward to all the amazing things in the future for you.
Thank you so much, Jordan. You're a legend.